Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. Tonight's show is about the homeless, and we call it Homeless. And with us we have three guests who work in the homeless area in terms of housing, in terms of direct services to the homeless, in terms of taking care of the children. And first is Jeannie Collison, and she is with Maili Land Catholic Charities. Thank you for coming. And we have George Harris. He's a lay minister at the United Church of Christ, and he works directly with the homeless. And we have Mike Coleman, President, Like a Child. Thank you all for coming. And we remind the viewers that we are live on the air, and we'd like to hear from you. For Oahu, it's 956-5670, and for the neighbor islands, it is 1-800-342-7949. So please, let's hear from you, comments, questions, what have you. So I'd like to begin with Eugenie, and to tell us, what is it that you do at Maili Land, and what your particular concentration is.
First of all, Maili Land is a transitional shelter for homeless families. The primary criteria for being a resident at Maili Land is that you were homeless and that you have children under the age of 18. Our program is really well developed. We have case managers who work with the clients, and I'm part of what's called the People Empowerment Team. I'm an educational specialist. I also have colleagues who are employment specialists and a youth counselor. So we try to take care of the whole family, get them on their feet in 24 months and on to permanent housing.
Oh, great. Yeah. And George, what do you do in terms of direct services?
Well, from Central Union Church, we have a ministry that does outreach to the unsheltered homeless, specifically in Ala Moana Park. It's, I would say, less structured than what Jeannie described, and it begins as from the basis of ministry. So it begins through a weekly worship service and a fellowship that we have with the homeless, and out of that we build relationships between individuals in the church, and out of those relationships then specific individuals' needs can be addressed. And over the past 2 years that's happened on quite a number of occasions where people, whether it be jobs or housing or substance abuse treatment, they begin to get those needs met. But it's all out of the foundation and context and beginning of some sort of relationship to the fellowship that we have in Ala Moana Park.
Yeah, great. And Mike, you have an organization Like a Child, so would you like to say something about it? And I understand we have a couple of photos also that we can show, and you might want to explain those photos as well.
Sure. Like a Child is a model for risk reduction in the community. We identify kids that are at high risk and likely to be going the wrong direction later in life, and homeless children are like any other child. They learn from their parents. If they're homeless in a homeless family, they will grow up and learn how to be homeless, and so we try to break that circle, and we do that in a number of areas. Homelessness is just one of those. What we do is we take these high-risk kids and we get them involved in community activities, and we teach them responsibility. And our kids have done everything from litter collection at Sand Island to going up to the Manalani Rest Home to hand out gifts at Christmas. And by learning this responsibility and community involvement, we teach them better values and how to, we get them on the right track, basically.
Yeah. Would you mind explaining those photos that are on the Elmo? You might want to.
Sure. The picture.
Which one?
Well, that's Shaquille O'Neal there.
Oh, right.
And we were fortunate enough to get some tickets to the Lakers preseason game, and if you can move it up a little, Professor, move that picture so you can see the kids on the bottom.
Oh,
the lower picture. Can you move it up?
Oh,
and
okay.
If you can see, they have Shaq on their bellies. And when one of the publicists for the Lakers saw the letters there, she went and told Shaq about it, and he said, "Well, bring them off court." And he met him and took pictures with him, and And that kid there on the left with that black shirt on, somebody tried to buy that shirt because Shaq's hand was on it, and he wouldn't sell it for nothing. And that was a big moment in their life. And then the other picture is the Fort Street Mall gift giveaway we did the 23rd of December at Fort Street Mall. We handed out about 2,000 gifts to about 300 needy children. 100 of those we bust in from the Waimanalo shelter.
So the question that we have on the Elmo here also is comes from Honolulu Weekly headline, hopeless for the homeless, and so we're gonna be talking about that. Okay, here it is. Hopeless, is it hopeless for the homeless on the Elmo? So that's the question, and we have like another photo also from the Honolulu Weekly that shows some problems with the homeless is that they are really under a tree. So here is another one on the Elmo as well. If we can show it on the Elmo, can we show it on the Elmo? Yeah, right here. Okay. So meaner streets. So is it hopeless from your own perspective, George? Because you really directly deal with the homeless in parks and so on. What is your perspective in that regard?
It's certainly not certainly not hopeless from the perspective of working with individuals. I mean, every day I know all of us see individuals really transform their lives in beautiful ways. I think, though, if we look at it as an overall social problem and we set the bar too high, well, then we're going to end up, sort of with unreasonable expectations about what might be able to be achieved in any kind of given time period. So, no, I don't think it's hopeless at all, but I do think we need sort of a realistic perspective.
Yeah, that's good. From your perspective, would you agree with George on this?
Absolutely.
And give us like some of your experiences in this regard. Yeah.
We have many success stories where we have had people literally go from the beach through the shelter program, and with the help of groups like Habitat for Humanity are now homeowners. We have others who have gone on to college and they have degrees now and are extremely successful. We have others that fall back, and there's going to be, great success stories. We have kids that are, I know that you're particularly interested in the kids. I look at our kids and I see resiliency. They come from some terrible situations in some cases, but yet they're able to survive with a little bit of support. They're able to survive, and not only survive, but thrive. We've got kids on the honors list, the principals list at schools. It's wonderful to see.
So it's nothing wrong with the people who are homeless. It's just like conditions were such that, they found themselves really in bad straits. Yeah. So it's good to have, programs like yours, and such initiatives as yours too, and Mike with the children as well. So to prevent these kinds of things from degenerating more than they already are, and to try help out some kids, we have a video from IHS Institute for Human Services, and this is a homeless person talking. It's about a minute or so. So whenever the tape is ready, we can roll, and then we can comment on that. Yeah.
For the Star Bulletin, I sell papers during the day, and usually till about noon. Then I go looking for work. Then sometimes around here, I volunteer during the kitchen. I do kitchen help around here. I've been here 3 years. Mostly it's jobs and housing is what I'm. IHS has provided me shelter right now, but I'd rather have work and get my own shelter. I do pretty good in the mainland. I've been trying to do that here. I got off on a rough start the first time. I bit by a jellyfish twice. I was in Tripler Hospital, and last year when I was just getting going, of course, we know about 9/11. That kind of hurt me, and I guess, well, it hurt a lot of people. So right now I'm trying to pick up where I left off and just keep going from there. I just get VA medical. I don't get anything until I'm 65. It's the contract we signed back when I was in Vietnam. So according to them, I got a good retirement coming, but I got a long ways to go. So, but at least they're there when I get hurt or something, where they take good care of me. So that's one thing behind me.
So here we have a perspective from a homeless person, and he's just a nice guy that he's trying to make it. And I in fact asked him if he were a veteran, and he said yeah. But I was wondering how come the Veteran Administration doesn't do much for him beyond the question of just the health care and stuff like that. And I don't know how much health care he gets from there. So do you find, in your work with the homeless, that some veterans, the Veteran Administration fails to deal with them adequately, or what is the case in your experience?
A lot of the folks that I work with are veterans, no doubt about it. A lot of them are veterans 45 to 55, somewhere in that age range. Most of them are connected with the VA and have a good experience with that relationship. But their needs are also very complex. They're very extensive needs, and they're not needs that can easily be remedied just by a visit to the VA. People's lives are as complex as our lives are, and that's a lot, especially when you're homeless. So I would be not inclined to sort of point my finger at the VA, a finger of blame, but to just sort of acknowledge. I know just about 2 weeks ago, the VA has every year they have a big homeless stand down in Ala Moana Park, and the whole range of services available to folks that are living unsheltered are made available to folks there, and they really make a real effort to get people signed up and really make a connection with people there. So the VA is working pretty hard in that respect, and I know some good people working up there. But these are tough problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. There's this other thing on the Elmo we can show that this in the advertiser, charities fight plan to move homeless, and it was from the downtown area. So is there any perspective on this, Mike?
Yes, sir. That's I just rankles me a little, if you don't mind. It's like this fellow you just had on the clip from the homeless shelter. I mean, it was a poignant piece. The guy's a decent human being, and he was a veteran, and everybody knows the kind of troubles those guys came back with. And through really, apparently no clear fault of his own, he's encountered some difficulties in life. And as a society, we kind of turn our backs on people like that sometimes, and to try to sweep these guys out of our parks and sweep them off of our benches and under the carpet, it's got to be the unkindest response that I can think of to it.
Yeah. Because yes, did you?
I was just going to follow up with what Mike said and reference your earlier comment about is it hopeless for the homeless. I think the clip from the gentleman here is maybe indicative of that. We, I think, are too insistent on evaluating the success of somebody by them successfully making a transition, and then that person's considered a success, and then that makes everybody else failures. And I work in particular with a lot of folks who are unsheltered, some folks who are unsheltered for years at a time. Absolutely incredible folks. I mean, smart, engaging, have rich life experiences over decades. They've held down fascinating, responsible jobs, and they've had more than their share of challenges in life. And some of these folks aren't going to be the success story on the next news clip. They're not going to be the ones that are, on the television at IHS saying, well, I got my life together and now I'm on to this. At least that might not happen tomorrow. But I think too often, we then sort of say, well, these folks are hopeless. But that's the wrong paradigm. It's the wrong paradigm to frame it that way.
Yeah, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and stereotyping about the homeless. Once you're homeless, some people think, oh, it's because through fault of your own, and nothing in terms of the structures of society or somebody. I mean, a lot of homeless I know have degrees, and were supervisors and this and that, but something happened. So it's not like their fault, and I'm glad we are bringing that about, so to educate the public about the homeless and the structural and institutional problems with homelessness. So would you care to, from your own perspective, talk more about that?
Well, I think there are a lot of different faces to homelessness. Everyone has the potential for becoming homeless. In this state in particular, too many of us live one paycheck away from homelessness. Sometimes less than one paycheck away. The reality is that we have people at our shelter who have gone to college. We have people at our shelter who are illiterate. And we try to meet people where they are to give them the services that we can to help them along. And I think that is what's so critical, because when you're talking about unsheltered homelessness, you are talking about such severe barriers to being able to go out and get a job. The employer will ask you to fill out an application that asks for an address, and it's real hard to say the third tree from the entrance. They want a phone number where they can call you back, and the telephone company has made things now so even the public phones, you can't get return calls on them. They're driving people away from places like the parks where maybe they can at least have, well, to be blunt, a bathroom and a shower.
A campsite and a place to keep their things.
Yes, and they don't have a lock on the door. One of the things that we find, people particularly who have come directly from the beach, when they come to our place, they're so thankful for just a lock on the door. It's something you don't have when you're unsheltered. And if you think about it, it's expensive to be out on the beach trying to live. You have to buy propane, you have to buy ice, just day to day trying to find some way to live. And there are people on the beach who are working,
Absolutely.
but they don't have the money to get into shelter here in Hawaii, or their family's too big and the landlords don't want to rent to them. There are kids out there unsheltered.
I believe it's 8% of all homeless services users are children, and that's what Like a Child tries to address, at least to break that circle, and I'd also like to say that homeless, we regard it as a state of mind, and it's a learned thing. If it can happen for a number of reasons, whether you're a Vietnam vet or lost a job, and a lot of people have lost jobs since 9/11. So we're going to see a sharp upswing in those kinds of problems, I think, and we already have. But it's a lot of it has to do with the belief that you just can't climb your way up out of this. Or a lot of these people that are homeless are also victims of things like depression and victims of drug addictions and things like that, and that may explain a lot of society's impatience with that stuff. But the truth is that there are a significant number of homeless, and among those I would certainly include the 8% who are children and have done no harm to anyone. A significant number who really are not there through any fault of their own.
Yeah. And this is, talks to the thing that we were saying earlier, that, it's a complex, multifaceted thing why you become homeless. It's not just one thing, like you just lost it, so to speak. There's so many other things, so that reinforces. Yeah.
And there's a real kind of downward spiral involved that I've observed too, where these things happen, the things that Mike said and the things that Jeannie has described, and after a while, a number of folks begin to think, well, this is their lot, this is what they deserve. A lot of folks they've had some rough lives, and they haven't been saints in their lives, but they will kind of then internalize that and say, well, I guess this is really what I deserve, and I'm not here to sort of evangelize, but I'll say that there is a redemptive, there's a need for redemption in there too, and whether that comes from a church or whether that comes from getting back on your feet in society and holding down a job, that need for redemption is just enormous. It really is.
Yeah, and there are a number of agencies that provide services for the homeless. For instance, Catholic Charities, United Church of Christ. There's East Hawaii Coalition for the Homeless, Gregory House Program, Hololoa'a, and a number of other things, including Institute for Human Services and others on Kauai and Maui and so on. So we have this video from Human Services, Institute for Human Services, IHS, saying what kind of services they provide and what kind of services are needed. So let's roll.
Some of the programming that we do offer includes a learning center that's available at the women's shelter, but is also offered to both women and men. And at the Learning Center, there's availability of instructors provided by the adult education program through Farrington School. They help work with people on their GEDs. They do a little bit of job readiness, including preparation of resume and some other related job searching activities. We try to have some resources about jobs from the local newspapers and other sources. And we also have computers available just for regular use, including setting up email accounts to help improve communication with some of their friends and family. In addition, programs that we have going on currently include a special program for single women, in that we have a smaller amount of people that work with one case manager, and that allows them to have both more time to work with individual people, allows some kind of group synergy activities to help the women bond together and help themselves. And the lower amount of people that the caseworker works with also allows them to do some follow-up care after they've left the shelter. Certainly one of the problems with the people that we work with is the recidivism rates of people who leave the shelter but then ultimately come back in a few weeks, in a few months, even in a couple of years. So we have a lot of people certainly transition out of the shelter system, but too often they come back and their problem never was really resolved on a long-term basis. We have a partnership with the Institute for Family Enrichment, which is doing a series of parental nurturing programs for some of the families. We do usually have about 20 to 25 families that are staying here, and their problems are often a little bit different than some of the single people. And since they do have a full family, it's often more of a challenge to try to place them back in the community in a permanent housing situation. We encourage guests of IHS to save their money while they're staying at the shelter, since they don't have any rent to pay, and we certainly provide meals 3 times a week. So their costs should go down a lot. There certainly are other costs that people still have to attend to, but we encourage them to save money. We just started a program that offers some matching funds for people that do save their money in a timely manner, and in a manner consistent with their service plan developed by the case manager. And we hope that'll certainly be an additional stimulus to help people work their way back to some self-sufficiency and help.
Yeah, so here there are these kinds of services that IHS provides, and of course the other service providers as well. And yet, there's this headline in the Monday Advertiser, March 4th, that says Honolulu mean to homeless group says, and this is the National Coalition for the Homeless, which is Washington-based. So on the one hand, we have all these people like yourselves willing and wanting to provide all those services, and yet we have this rap that Honolulu is mean to the homeless. So any kind of something on that? Would you agree with this, or do you not agree?
I would agree that it's true, if I may. But I would like to say that it's, this is a real tourist-oriented economy, and they have a lot of concerns about things like that, their visibility to the tourist spender. But the whole approach is wrong. If I may, Professor, there's 2 approaches, in my opinion, to any difficulty or problem. There's a problem-oriented solution, and a solution-oriented solution. The problem-oriented solution is if you have a cancer, you fight the sores on your arms, but you're not doing anything about the cancer. And until you address that, your sores will keep popping up. And the problem-oriented solution is giving a hungry man a fish instead of teaching him how to fish. And right here, the problem is to attack, to try to move them out of our parks and off of our benches, and to criminalize. Do you know that they're talking about making debt a criminal offense and putting people in jail now? They have a bill before the legislature right now to try to put poor people in jail. I think we used to do that back in the 19th century.
The poor house. Yeah.
and we used to burn witches and practice slavery and hang horse thieves, and this is just a step backwards from a society to take this kind of approach to animals.
I mean, I was, to be honest with you, struck with what Ben Lee, who is the administrative assistant to Harris, and we should be frank about this whole thing. If we want to address a problem, we have to recognize what it is and then go forward. And so on the Elmo, I have this quote from Thursday, February 14th, which is Valentine's Day of all places. And then I don't know if we can see it very well, but maybe I should forget about the Elmo, and I want to read this one because it's very interesting. It's unfair, that's Ben Lee is saying, it's unfair that because the city wants to clean up its public spaces and parks and make them useful for the general public, and then we get criticized for not taking care of the homeless. That's not the point. We cannot have the homeless or a small group of people monopolize our public spaces. There are 50,000 workers downtown. We want to make sure we have a vibrant downtown. So exactly, I mean, you're talking about a tourist-oriented society, service-oriented society, and these guys are in the way, so let's get rid of them.
Let's just make it a crime and just grab them and lock them all up.
Yeah, and I think that is, not good from a public figure. I mean, in a big city. I mean, the biggest city in the States. So the other thing, though, it's interesting that, Sharon Black quoted in the same piece, and she's outreach coordinator of HPD. So the Honolulu Police Department, knows the problem, what the problem is, and they have a different way of handling it, it seems to me. But then they have to go according to the law, in the sense. So, but they don't like it. So Sharon Black, who also delivers services, direct services to the homeless, food and stuff like that, she says you don't have to like the idea that there are homeless out there. You don't have to be comfortable with it. In fact, you shouldn't be comfortable with it. And this is a very important thing. But to sit there and figure some way to push them out of town to be someone else's problem is a bad reflection on our community. So Ben Lee is not doing the community any service. Because we know that we are not a mean community. So he should lead by example. In fact, not rather than the community leading him by example, where the community doesn't have the power that he has, or Harris for that matter. So instead of trying to get rid of them, why don't we start looking for solutions? And it's not a problem-oriented solution, but solutions. A solution is not moving them from one spot to another. Instead of fixing the problem, it's hide the problem. That is why the problem continues to exist, And so I just wanted to, because when I read it, I was really kind of incensed about what Ben Lee is saying and what the city is doing and what the state is doing. I mean, they give charities and others about $3.5 million, etc. But it seems to me it's not enough from your experiences. Because otherwise, why do we have people on the streets still? Any comments on this?
I guess I affirm, what Mike said and what Sharon Black is saying. I think it's I think there's a fundamental error in treating homeless people as sort of a public policy problem to be solved like you would treat potholes or like you would treat cleaning the Alawai Canal or something like that. And then I think too often our service providers are just seen as agents of fixing the problem. I mean, rather than sort of really addressing people as people, the whole person, and developing a relationship with them, and then out of that relationship addressing whatever needs they have, instead, and in a way that sort of then relieves all the rest of the folks from their responsibility, and they can then look at the city or they can look at the service providers and they can say, well, how come there's still these folks in the park, and how come there's still these folks on the beaches? I mean, what are they doing? And I think there needs to be just a real change in the way we as a society think of the homeless. And if we stop looking at the homeless as just sort of a public policy problem to be solved and begin looking at people as whole people, then I think we'll begin to find a solution in that.
Yeah. Anything, Jeannie?
Well, to me, there's not a homeless person. I don't know what that person would look like.
Exactly.
There are many, many different faces to homelessness. There's our veteran, like we saw on the screen there. There's the lady we see with the shopping cart. There's the folks that you've seen out on the streets with their families and kids. There's the kids that I see at the beach. There's kids that I've seen down at a program run by Waikiki Health Center called Youth Outreach. That's the 16 to 21-year-old kids that are out on the beach that their families have just thrown them out. We have a lot of different faces, and because we have different faces, you can't have just one solution, one policy that says, oh, this is what we're going to do with the homeless. Well, you've got to work with the individual.
Like removing the benches. How absurd that by removing the benches that somehow that will then address these incredibly complex lives that people have.
Also,
go ahead.
Well, Jeannie, that was very well said. It's to my thinking, the problem is just a lack of compassion and a lack of civility. As a society, we tend to look the other way and not see the humanity in these people, like you say, the children. And I went the piece that you called me about in the Sunday paper about homeless children was about 4 little girls that I found right across the street from the homeless shelter on Christmas Day. They were just camped out on the curb, and these little girls hadn't done anything to anybody. They were 11, 9, 4, and 2 years old, and there's just we're so underfunded in our efforts to solve this homeless problem that we've got children sleeping on the streets and camped out on the curbs. But the point I'm trying to make is that unless we have more compassion for our fellow human beings, that are just a little less fortunate than we are, we're not going to solve it. And if I may too, I'd like to add, I have a friend who wrote to me as a result of that Sunday piece I wrote on homeless kids. A lady by the name of Stacy Thoreau contacted me about the article and asked me if I would help her write one. And she has this idea, and it's just one of many that might work. Her idea is this helping hands concept where the eligible homeless, those who don't have drug problems, maybe they're not emotionally or psychiatrically challenged, people like our veteran friend who is otherwise capable, could be matched up with senior citizens who don't have a helper or a companion that would love to have someone come into their home and help them. And so we could at the same time get this certain people that are homeless off the street and into a job, and at the same time help certain senior citizens or disabled people who would love to have
There's
that kind
a number of ways of
hundreds of ideas.
We have a caller, Pat from Makaha. So Pat, you're on the air.
Okay, I want to first say hello to Jeannie and to George. I have been working with what I call houseless people since 1996 when the state moved them off of Makua Beach, moved them, but they didn't care where. They just evicted them and ruined the wonderful little homes they had made for themselves so that the general public could have use of the park. Well, they had $500,000 to improve that park for the general public, and what did they do? They put up concrete barriers so people couldn't reach the beach, and during the week, the inside road to the beach is locked.
Yeah.
And so what have we gained? People have moved from Makua to other beaches, and I was just out there tonight. I want to commend Honolulu Community Action Program and the Hawaii Food Bank. They feed a lot of the people out here on our Leeward Coast. I coordinated for a while the Great Tarp Project. We provided temporary shelter material. It turned out to be, I didn't want to call it anymore the Great Tarp Project, but tents, tarps, and toilets. Because for about 8 months I helped to find money so that we could rent toilets for people who are living alongside the road, between the road and the beach.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Pat. Yeah.
Nice to hear your voice, Pat.
Yes.
Well, this is the other concept, of the houses rather than homeless. It has quite a bit of merit, it seems to me. But anyway, I'd like to show another video that's Mr. Vincent, Daryl Vincent, who is a caseworker at IHS, and to see what kind of things he does, on the ground, actually. Ullman talked about the services, but here Mr. Vincent is a caseworker. And what does he do? Tape is ready, we roll.
Our job is to help the people that come into the shelter obtain housing, get psychiatric needs if necessary, substance abuse treatment, and ultimately to find housing. And not only to find housing, to be able to go out there and sustain housing. A lot of the clients that we deal with are dually diagnosed, which means they have a substance abuse problem and a mental health problem. So our job is basically to access the services they need in order to provide a higher level of care and living. The problems that we encounter dealing with getting resources is, first of all, just lack of resources. There's little suitable, affordable housing out there for people that have a limited income, such as welfare. You only have $418 a month. Social Security or SSI is usually somewhere in the $500 range. So it's really hard to find housing that's suitable and that's outside of the area, that only downtown area. A lot of the clients we deal with sometimes have drug abuse problems. So staying in the downtown area sometimes is not conducive for them. The lack of resources also, when you're dealing with the mental health and people that have substance abuse problem, a lot of times it's hard to treat both. So a lot of times the mental health agencies cannot treat them if they're doing drugs. Meanwhile, the substance abuse treatment cannot treat them unless they're stabilized on medication for their mental illness. So sometimes we run into a problem of placing dually diagnosed clients, as well as finding mental health services for clients that don't have insurance. We do have a clinic downstairs that helps us out, that deal with the clients that don't make appointments and have a hard time with insurance and thus far. So I would say basically the number one thing is lack of resources, lack of housing, and sometimes just the bureaucracy of the system of trying to get things facilitated fast enough. Obviously, with lack of resources means lack of money and lack of funding. So always the best thing is things just as this is bringing awareness to the homeless situation, that it's not only people that just don't want to work or something of that nature. It's people that do want to work, that have mental problems or drug abuse problems, and once they get back on their feet, we need a place to be able to have these people live. So bringing awareness is the number one thing. Another thing is networking with other agencies and developing relationships so they understand, once again, the homeless population and the situation they're in. Any given month I've transitioned, or the case managers have transitioned per case manager, anywhere from 1 to 7 or 8 clients a month. Sometimes you have months that you have a lot of guys you transition out, sometimes you don't. So it depends on the caseload of that month, the client working with you, the relationship, depends on a lot of factors. But we are relatively successful if we can have the client, first of all, access the service, have the service available to them, help them save the money, and then try to find something that's suitable. We do, hopefully, once they get out there and they have these things set up, we don't want them just to go out there and here you are. Get out there and able to sustain themselves over a period of time.
Yeah, good. And then there's also another problem that occurs with the homeless situation is the question of recidivism, and this is, I think, is a very important problem. And if you don't mind, I have another tape I want to show from Mike Ullman, also from IHS, who talks specifically about that and other issues as well, and then we can comment on all those together. So if the tape is ready.
We have 2 shelters, first of all, the men's shelter and the women and family shelter. And even that we still subdivide into kind of 3 population groups: the single men, the single women, and the families. And there's problems with recidivism in each of the groups, and they each have different they each, I think, have different characteristics that are associated with the recidivism, although they certainly share some commonalities. Among the single men, there's kind of 2 types of recidivism. There's people that will stay in the shelter for part of the month, and then when they do get their income, whether it's through benefits checks or other sources, then they'll go out and live outside of the shelter in, shall we say, an inefficient manner of using the resources they have, and then consequently they run out of those resources in a week or two and are back in the shelter. And there are a number of people where that's kind of their ongoing pattern. They may get money at the beginning of the month, which allows them to live out in the community for 5 to 10 days, and then they'll run out of the money and come back in, and then at the end of the month, and then at the beginning of the month again, the cycle will start. That's why in general our numbers increase towards the end of the month as people run out of their benefits money. And the second problem of the recidivism is certainly people that leave the shelter, after staying, and then in a few months kind of come back because they haven't really addressed the problems that have kept them in the state of homelessness. And certainly, I think if you talk to all the people that work at IHS, homelessness we think of as primarily an outcome of their other problems, which for the most part, for the single people, include mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and often a combination of both of those issues. Whether one came before the other, at some point it doesn't really matter, but a large majority are dealing with both of them. For some of the families, there's certainly a problem of recidivism due to family conflict and often domestic violence involved. There's certainly the general income issues with some of the families. We don't have statistics as to whether the families have a higher recidivism rate than the individuals, but my inclination in the time that I've been here is that they do generally have a little bit less of a problem. Once we can move them out, they usually will stay out. Not that some of them don't come back, but the transition can be usually more successful because since they do have a family, they often have access to a little bit higher benefits and other services through the government than just single people. Especially for single men, there's often not a lot of programs that want to help them out.
Well, this is a good issue, that he talked about recidivism. So in your experiences, how do you see that question? Do you have that problem in your experiences with the homeless?
There are a few families who have come back to the shelter. There are a few families that we see that are again living on the beach. But on the whole, our shelter and our program provides 1-year follow-up case management services and services of any and all of the programs available. So we try to support them through that period, that second transition period, if you will, so that they can stay outside the shelter system.
And you were mentioning, you provide services somewhat different from IHS because IHS is an emergency shelter, whereas you for a longer period of time. Yeah.
Right. What we can provide is we provide 24 months of services for our clients and residents, and then 1-year follow-up after that. So, first of all, they know where they're going to be sleeping. They're going to have a roof over their head for at least 24 months. And they know that where their kids are going to go to school, they've got phones available. They can start to approach a level of normalcy in terms of their living situation.
And they can write that they have an address.
They have an address. Yeah. Yes, and they have a phone.
That's very important,
Yeah.
George, in your experience, how might that?
Well, certainly regarding recidivism, one thing I'm thinking of the proverb that will forever be associated with Hillary Clinton. It takes a village, and there really does need to be a community of support. And Jeannie and her colleagues are doing incredible work, but they can't do it alone. The community needs to find ways to come together, because the folks that find ways of plugging into a whole community of support are the ones that really build strong lives and really kind of continue on, and not just from subsistence, but to really full, great lives down the road. Mike said earlier about compassion. I want to offer something hopeful, and that is that when I came to Central Union Church about 3 years ago, and Central Union Church is a church that has a reputation of being sort of an upper middle class church, and the Rich Howley Church, or whatever you want to call it, so people when I went there, people said, oh boy, you're not going to be able to do anything there. Clearly that hasn't been the case, and clearly the response that I've gotten is people so badly wanted to do something, but they just didn't know how. They just didn't know where to enter in. And I think that's a challenge beyond just sort of hiring professionals to do this. How do we create opportunities for the folks in the community that it breaks their heart every time they drive by and they see the guy at the bus stop, or they see the little kid down on Fort Street or whatever? How do we create opportunities for those folks to enter in and actually act on these things they're feeling? Churches are one fantastic way to do that, and I guess I would make that appeal, for folks that are involved in churches out there. If you aren't actually reaching out to some of these folks, well, you talk to your pastor and say, what can we do? What can we do to reach out to these folks, bring them into our church, provide that village that they need to help support them.
And they also have to have, in terms of the wherewithal to do that, in terms of the city helping them doing this and not blocking them at every step they take. For instance, I know this church in Hauula, and it's in one of the papers here, providing food and emergency in Waikiki and other places, and they told them you can't do it anymore. Oh, Ala Park too, you can't do it. I mean, give me a break,
You're right.
So that's something. I mean, the churches are very important, it seems to me, in this regard, because they live in the community and so on. They have members from there, but you have to have also legislation and what have you, and even some resources put to have teeth in all this kind of activity, and therefore it'll be like a global kind of effort to wipe out homelessness, it seems to me.
How ironic is that? On a national level, we have these faith-based initiatives saying that churches should do more, and then on the local level, the churches are being, having their hands slapped and saying, get out of the parks, don't serve the homeless, shut down those programs.
We're going to cut state funding because, it should be a private effort, and then, you don't allow that to happen.
You don't allow that to happen.
Give me a break.
So we have a lot of churches that come to Mileyland and help. We have weekly Bible study groups. We have a church from Mililani that comes in once a month and has games and teaches the Bible to the children, and just we got a lot of support from churches in our community. Not just Catholic churches, by the way, but all of the churches. And
we can extend it, I'm sorry, to Buddhists and others.
Absolutely. And that's something, sometimes when they hear we're from Catholic Charities, they think, oh, do I have to be Catholic to get into the shelter? And the answer is no. No.
Good, Mike, you wanted to say something on that?
Well, just going back to the recidivist thing, until we can commit at least a majority of our resources to the long-term solutions instead of constantly treating the problems and the symptoms, we have no hope of solving the situation at all. And there's a certain amount of people, no matter what you do, that will be homeless. They had hobos back in the 20s and 30s. But the problem, if you've noticed lately, has exploded, and it's, I think, parallels some of our other social problems, the distances we've found in the web age and the internet and all that, and our insensitivity and our, if we don't look, maybe it'll go away, and kind of an attitude in society. It's, the nutshell is, if I may refer to our agency, Like a Child is a preventive approach to keeping children from going a certain way in life, and to to get them back is so hard to do. To get some of these poor people, I tell you, it breaks my heart. These guys pushing these garbage-filled grocery carts down the street. You know, they take them all day to get to the bathroom. It's so full of things that they'll never use. It's such a clear, sad thing. It's so hard to get that back, to get this guy back to a normalcy. So what's easy or easier is to keep him from going there, to find this person before we know how to find from statistics who is likely to go this. We know that the children of homeless are likely to follow in, like father, like son. It runs in the family. It's not rocket science to figure out who most of these kids are today that will be our future homeless problem. So the long-term solution is to identify as many of those as we can and to put as many services as we can into that solution-oriented solution, and then deal with these mentally challenged and drug-addicted problems and with what resources we have left, and they'll be more effective.
Yeah, actually, it's very important, the preventive thing. But that speaks to, like, you have to have programs to make sure that people have jobs, people have like a safety net and all that kind of stuff, and that requires money. I don't mind my taxes going to those kinds of things rather than nuclear issues, nuclear bombs, and you know, the stupid wars and all that kind of stuff. You know, so this is a very important thing. And then another thing that you know, someone said that society is judged by the way it treats its elderly and its children. I mean, if a society has throwaways, you know, that is a reflection on society, not only on Bentley or Harris or Caetano or me or you or anyone like that, but on the entire society as a whole. And this is a measure of really how civilized a society is. You know, so it is incumbent upon us to attack it in such a way that you know, we try to nip it in the bud before it starts, and that's the preventive thing on that. Another, yeah,
just
go ahead.
One more
yes,
brief
yeah.
thing. It's been established now. These are not even theories. These are facts. They've proven it. That $1 on prevention saves $7 on treatment.
Yeah.
Every dollar on prevention saves $7. They've established that, I think, with prisoners and drug treatment from the problems with the 80% of prisoners who have drug problem. And it's the same thing. It's just the same thing. It's so much wiser to spend the money, and it's so much kinder to help those people that need it.
One problem we haven't yet, or one issue we haven't yet talked about, is the question of ethnicity and the homeless. So I'm from ethnic studies, I teach there, so I have to bring that one up. So there's a video, and I asked Mike Ullman on that, because, you know, they see a lot of people and so on, and then we can have your comments on this. So if the tape is ready, we roll.
The Chinese and the Japanese population is vastly underrepresented at the homeless shelter here. Compared to the Caucasian population, African Americans and Hawaiians. And, you know, one of the reasons people would offer for that is, despite the fact that perhaps Chinese and Japanese in Hawaii have slightly higher incomes, there's certainly enough on the lower end of the scale, and they should be no less susceptible to mental illness and substance abuse. You know, a key factor there would be potentially a hypothesis would be a stronger family foundation for a lot of them to rely on if they do run into problems of losing their job, having health issues. There's somebody to turn to. I mean, often the problem with the people that come here is they've run out of other people that can help them, whether it's their family or their friends. So they have a very both fragmented and very weak social and family network to rely upon. In a very sociological way, America kind of is a very isolating environment. It's a very kind of competitive environment where the individual is kind of predominates over a need for the family to be the dominating force. So when societies kind of lose their family foundation and focus more on individuals making it themselves, you're going to, I think, have this kind of these kinds of problems.
Yeah, one other thing, since we talked about this, I have a short video as well of a very nice gentleman that I met at IHS also, and he volunteers. So I just want us to show that perspective. It's just only like less than half a minute. So if the tape is ready, we roll.
I've been coming here for about 3 years, and I help set up the tables and the chairs, and I enjoy my meals here. Well, ever since I retired from a bottled water supply, and I've been kind of lonely, so I had to find something to do. So I've been coming here to enjoy myself and enjoy the people around.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things we were talking about earlier, is that you can match certain people who can do something, and then they help themselves and help others, and you feel community and communion actually with those kinds of things. But any kind of yeah, go ahead.
I mean, just affirm what the gentleman there was saying. That was just a beautiful tape. You've made reference a couple times to the need for more funds, and clearly there's a need for more funds, but those funds will come when certainly the will of the people just won't allow this to happen anymore. And I like telling a story about a gentleman named Walter. He lives in one of the condos, high-rise condos, Mauka of Ala Moana Park, and he's a retired doctor, and every day he walks his little Pekingese dog or whatever in Ala Moana Park. And when he walks his dog, he talks to people, and he has just a great relationship with the homeless folks that live in Ala Moana Park. And one, just the relationship in itself is redemptive, and two, when they get in trouble and have an infection or something, he'll give them medical advice. I mean, I think that's kind of the Walter approach to this whole problem. If we get out, we walk our dogs, we just keep our eyes open, we greet people, then the will be there for the funds. I mean, if we all did that, then we wouldn't be able to stand anymore for problems like this to exist.
Yeah. One thing I would like to show that tape, since we're talking about resources and funds, and then we can make the other comments as well. So if the tape is ready, and it's a short one too.
IHS certainly always needs support from the community, both dollars-wise and certainly volunteer-wise in appropriate ways. But one thing that we're trying to push and will continue to push is the homeless service system itself grows out of the fact that the large system that's supposed to be helping people, whether it's the social services department, whether it's the mental health division, or the Veterans Administration programs. I mean, we feel in part that a lot of people come to us that should be being served by these other governmental agencies, which are certainly much more funded than us.
Yeah, so here it's also a question of resources, but also it seems to me a question of coordination as well. So anything, Jeannie, on that?
On coordination of services, one of the things that we have is we work with the Hawaii Community Development and Housing Corporation. They provide some of the funds for our shelter. We work with a lot of other nonprofits. For example, on the IHS, they mentioned the Institute for Family Enrichment.
Yes.
Wonderful group of people that come out and provide nurturing classes, keiki play morning. We work with the Cooperative Extension Service here that provides budgeting and nutrition classes. By bringing all of those resources together, our families are helped. Yes. Our families have more of the things that they need to turn around, to make that difference. What he has said about things that are needed, money is needed always, but sometimes it's just simple things like when our families come to us, they don't have a bed. One of our goals is to get them off the floor, because when our other families leave and transition out, they get to take the beds with them.
Good. We're running out of time, but thank you very much for coming, and thank you for watching, and hope to see you on the front lines. Thank you very much.